I want to welcome everybody. I'm Samantha Kimple. I'm the program officer for Creative Sonoma. And so I know a lot of you on this call from our grant making and our professional development programs, which I manage. And so it's great to see some of your faces. We haven't seen you in a while. We decided to do this series as a great way to touch base on some of the things that had evolved from your own requests this spring, especially after the first shutdown orders came from coronavirus. And so a lot of that, of course, right now is technology, and that will be going forward as far as virtual programming, virtual fundraising in the coming months. Hopefully by this time next year, this is not as much of an issue, but at least into the spring, we know that we'll be dealing with some form of virtual programming and social distancing. And so we thought peer-to-peer workshops is a great way for everyone to share their knowledge and learn from one another and contribute your ideas as we learn our ways of navigating through these things. And so I'd like to welcome you and also our presenters. So we're really happy to have two organizations with us that have been through doing a virtual gala. And so we have Stacy Pastis and Maggie Stockel from the Museum of Sonoma County. And thank you so much for being here, and you can let us know what your involvement is. I know Stacy's a board member and Maggie's on staff, but you can give a little bit about yourselves when you start your presentation. And then Colette Michaud and Melissa Long from the Children's Museum of Sonoma County. Colette's the founder and executive director of the museum, and Melissa works in development. And you as well can give a little bit more about what you do at your organization and your event as you present. And so the way that we structured this session is we're going to have about a 5-minute presentation from each organization about what their event was and what the elements were to that event. And then we'll have a round robin panel discussion, which each of them about what they learned, what their challenges were, what they'd recommend, their best tips. And then we'll open it up for discussion because some people on this call may have already had the experience of a virtual event. So we'd love to hear how it went for you. If you have your own tips, or if you have questions, of course, for the people that have been through it. And we'll hope to gather all of that information and share it as kind of our best advice from our local field with everyone in our arts organizations. So once again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to our presenters. And we'll kick it off with Children's Museum. We'd love to have you talk about your event. You'll need to unmute Colette and Melissa.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Colette Michaud from the Children's Museum of Sonoma County.
We're still not hearing you, Colette.
Oh,
that's weird.
Let's see.
I can hear.
Hello?
You, Colette.
Okay. Everybody else can hear me, Sam?
Yes. Okay, got you. I got you.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. So hello, everybody. Again, this is Colette from the Children's Museum of Sonoma County, and I'll try not to take up all the time because I want to give my colleague a chance to talk as well. But I would say that at a high level, we've been closed since March, right when the pandemic hit. And this virtual event was really an opportunity for us to stay connected with our visitors and our donors, our investors. And it was an opportunity to let them know what we're doing while we're closed and give them kind of a behind the scenes, this is the stuff they're working on, get them excited, get them dreaming with us about what the museum will be once we reopen. So it was at a very high level, that was sort of the goal, was to stay connected. We knew that going into it, we would not see the same sort of return on investment that we would in an in-person event, based on what we were hearing from other organizations that were doing virtual events. We also kind of went back and forth for a while on whether or not it was going to be in person or virtual. So that, because at the time it was really unclear as to how long the pandemic lockdown was going to be. So that was a little bit back and forth. And then everybody was sort of learning on the fly at the time. But I would say that the way we went at it was through a pre-recorded event, fully pre-recorded, with an auction as a side ability for people to give to the museum. So I'll turn it over to Melissa and see if she would like to add anything.
I think the big kind of macro level thing that I will add to, Colette, is that the virtual event takes just as much, if not more, time than an in-person event. And in hindsight, we should have made the decision to go 100% virtual much earlier than we did. We were all hopeful that we could have maybe at least a hybrid event. Looking at the future, I think just planning for virtual, knowing that it will take equal amounts of time, if not more, if you haven't already done website or auctions. We did a bigger auction for the first time. And that would have allowed us to do some things that we'll bring up in the discussion about securing sponsors earlier because of the pros of having a broader and more diverse market, about sending our save the dates earlier and doing a lot more marketing and even securing matching grants earlier. So that is sort of my big advice and takeaway. It's just that it took a lot of time, a lot of resources, and probably more than we expected because of the learning curve as well. So looking down the line at our next September event, we're already talking about putting our committee together.
Interesting. And what was the name of the event, and what was the actual duration of it? How long did it last? Was it?
Yeah, so it was 20 minutes. The pre-recorded event was 20 minutes in length. It started at 4:30 on a Sunday. We did have a pre-show that was 15 minutes long, so people could tune in early, and we used that as an opportunity to give credit, acknowledgement, and also let people know what we were up to. So it was, and also give people an idea how to bid and how to donate to the museum. So the pre-show was a pretty important thing. So all said, it was about 45 minutes. And then I can't remember the other question you had, Sam.
Yeah, just the structure of it and how long it lasted, and which parts were live and recorded versus recorded. So
it was
Yeah.
all pre-recorded this time. One of the things that I think was another good takeaway is if it's possible for the events going forward, is to keep with things that were similar from the past. So we kept with our name, Time to Wonder. We added sort of a tagline of Dream Big. We kept with the same date that we had planned. And even though we went back and forth on deciding whether it would be in person or partially in person or pre-recorded, having that kind of consistent date and time. Then, maybe we should have changed from a Sunday mid-afternoon, but for this first year, people had that on their calendars already. And I think that consistency and kind of awareness in the back of the mind for people who are doing year after year annual fundraisers was a real positive. People knew what to look for.
great, interesting. Now we'll hear a little bit about the Museum of Sonoma County event. So the elements of the event, and then we'll dig a little deeper into challenges and successes for each of the events. So if you want to take it away, Maggie and Stacy.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Stacy Pastis, and I serve on the board for the Museum of Sonoma County. I'm the development chair, and that is why I am involved in the museum's fundraisers. So we made the decision to pivot to an online event. Early on, it became clear to us that we weren't going to be able to do an in-person event. Our in-person event is usually in the fall. We call it a gala. So when we pivoted to the online event, we named that event an ungala, because for us, it was the exact opposite. The gala is something you do in person, and ungala. So you'll probably hear us refer to the event as our ungala. The event included an art auction. We auctioned off art from artists that either have a relationship with us or we have exhibited in the past. Some of those artists We split the proceeds of the auction with others donated the full proceeds of their pieces to us. We had another part of the event, which we called an adopt an object. Obviously, we have a permanent collection, so we gave people the ability to adopt a piece in our permanent collection for a year. And while it still lives at the museum with us, it becomes yours, you are sort of taking care of it. In addition, we had a live event that was streamed. It was at the end of our event, which was the opposite of what the Children's Museum did. They kicked off with the live event. We sort of ended with the live event. And that event included a guest speaker who was very passionate. It was Peter Coyote, who is a great friend to our museum. And if you don't know his name, you would know his voice, because he is the voice of all the Ken Burns, or many of the Ken Burns documentaries. I thought our live event was super fun. We also recorded it, and you were able to see it afterwards. Anything else that I'll let Maggie talk about the nuts and bolts, but before I do turn it over to Maggie, because we did the art auction, live event, and adopt an object, it was a very complicated event. And we had a very short amount of time to put the event together. Without Maggie's efforts, it would never have happened. And Maggie won't, toot her own horn, so to speak, but there are few companies out there that gave us, there are no companies out there that gave us the ability to run an auction and the adopt an object. It came down to Maggie sort of creating that platform for the museum. So Maggie, do you want to talk about that stuff a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Maggie, and I'm the development manager at the Museum of Sonoma County. And we chose fairly early in April to decide we were going to do a virtual event instead. We, like the Children's Museum, kept the same date because we did have a in-person date set. And then it was just a race from May until August to find the right technology solutions. So where we ended up landing was with MobileCause, and I really can't sing their praises enough. That piece of software is incredibly flexible. Like Stacy said, the one thing that it doesn't do is an auction with bidding, but it does text to give, and it has all sorts of customizable donation forms. So we were able to create forms where a person could buy or donate and adopt a share of an object or the entire object.
Great, and we'd love to share that as if you want to throw that into the chat, if you have a moment, a link to MobileCause, that'd be great.
I shall.
Awesome. And so what we'll do now is I asked each of our presenters before they came, but I'd love to talk through these things. I see some nods and questions coming up. So what were the 2 to 3 things that you really feel were the things that contributed to whatever success you would feel you had with the event? And also, I'd love you to touch on any advantages or unexpected positive outcomes that came from a virtual format. If you could comment on those kind of things.
Does it matter who goes first?
No, it does not.
Okay, I'll start. I would say for us, the 2 to 3 things that in my mind that contributed to our success was connecting ahead of time with our donors to let them know that we were doing an online event, calling, emailing, and just letting them know. A lot of these donors will not attend the event. As much work as you put into it, they will not attend the day of the event. And that's actually kind of a pro at the same time, because it gives people the flexibility to come on the day or look at it at another time. So in my view, that's kind of a strength of doing virtual events. but you can't expect them to show up for the day of the event, but you do need to call them and let them know. And so we received the majority of our gifts through the mail, actually, through checks and through online gifts, not actually through the auction or through the day of the event. We did get a lot of participation, though, from a wide variety of donors at all levels, which is unusual for an event. So again, another strength and success is being able to reach all of our donors, no matter what level of giving they are at. And that was something that really showed up for us. You really, in my opinion, you want to have an event, if you're going to do a virtual event, live or pre-recorded. And in our case, we did it pre-recorded. It needs to feel like an event, even if it's pre-recorded. And so in our case, we had our longtime auctioneer, Abra Anna Sills, who's very dynamic and very engaging. She ended up being our MC, which I have received a lot of comments after the event that she was engaging, and they really enjoyed her as our sort of MC. But whether you do it live or pre-recorded, I think that's an important part, is to think it is, even though it is virtual, it is still an event, and people are still expecting it to be an event of some sort.
I really like that feeling. I think that's a great piece of advice to share.
Yeah, and we can
something special.
Yeah, and we can get into that later in terms of, I think that's a big lesson that we learned about working with the videographer to make sure that they understand that, because a big piece of making this a successful event is videography, the editing, the cutting, especially if you're doing pre-recorded. And again, another strength of doing pre-recorded is you can edit it how you want. You are in complete control of how the end product looks to people. And again, because not that many people show up for the live event, you really are doing this for after the event, people to tune into YouTube, Instagram, wherever you stream this afterwards or save it. We got a lot more views after the event. And so, you're in our opinion, or in mine, I should say, we really are creating an event to be viewed after the actual day and live event.
Interesting.
Melissa, do you want to add anything to that?
Not to that specifically. I was just thinking about the positives that I'll just kind of add to. I talked about sponsorships a little bit earlier, and I think that we ended up with as many sponsorships as we have in years past. And one of the reasons was talking about how to reach a much bigger audience, because we were going to be so much on social media so many social media platforms, our newsletters, and people really did respond to that. Our sponsors, when they hear the numbers and the data, like we have this many subscribers on this channel or this channel, it was something, again, like I think we could get more of, knowing that we'd go into a virtual event. So I think that was a real positive for us and for our sponsors. They had more marketing space, I guess, and they had more views. The other thing was sort of the inclusivity. It was a much broader, much more diverse audience. We ended up with a lot more small donations. And so that inclusivity does add up, and it also brought a lot of goodwill, I think. So those are two advantages of the virtual, and Colette addressed a few others. The number of people who actually watched the event was, of course, smaller, as Colette mentioned, but we ended up with so many views because we were able to keep that YouTube video up for weeks, actually months afterwards. And people could go and look at it again and still have options to donate and see what we were up to. So the video did serve two purposes, sort of as a fundraiser, but also as an educational tool of what we were doing behind the scenes.
I think that's really fascinating, the idea of being able to tell your sponsor that they're going to have a much greater reach than perhaps the 100 people or 500 people, whoever, whether you're a small to a big gala, that are actually attending that specific site-specific event. So that's really an interesting point. Thank you. Stacy and Maggie, do you have other things that you wanted to contribute to what you found as the advantages or
Yeah,
things that went well?
So I'll just reiterate what Colette said, that reach out to your sponsors, because they will support. That was a big debate for us. Will they support this virtual event? And they definitely did. That was one of our strongest streams of revenue. But other notes is that we decided to make our event free. So there was no registration cost with the live program. And that was another thing that we were uncertain about. But what ended up happening is we got a lot of our donations as people registered for the event. So there is an option to add a donation with the free virtual ticket, and people did take advantage of that. Another thing that we were worried about was credit card fees. Since we were going to be doing most of our fundraising online rather than through checks, and MobileCause has a capability of letting the donor cover the credit card fees, and 80 to 90% of the donors covered the credit card fees. So that was another thing that we just had this like unknown, how much is that going to cost us to run this event? And then it just ended up not being an issue.
Interesting. Any other advantages or you feel were really successes that you wanted to highlight, even if you told us about them already?
We reached a new audience, like the Children's Museum said, without that big ticket price with the dinner, we did reach a new audience. We also saw people who usually come to our gala not engage because they are really interested in the experience of sitting down and having a dinner with their friend. So plus and minus there.
I think Maggie touched on a really important point that I didn't add either. The costs were far lower. So our overheads were so much lower than in previous years. And that's kind of another good point to donors, that we are really having as much money as possible go straight into what we want it to do. So although the time took the same amount or more, the costs were far lower.
Right. Yes. I will just emphasize that as well, Melissa. The costs were far lower, and that was great to celebrate, but the amount of time, especially the first time when you have that learning curve. But even I think next year we're looking at another virtual fundraiser, and I'm expecting it to take as much time as a regular in-person gala.
That's a really great point to share with people. And so I'm really looking forward. I'm just, thank you. These are really great points. And we'll provide a recap of this as well. And so we are hoping some people can really learn from this. This is fantastic. So I want to pivot now to talk in a positive way. What were your challenges? Some of you have kind of touched on that a bit, but how would you improve or change the events going forward? This is with the assumption that it's a virtual or mixed in-person and virtual event. Anyone's welcome to leap in and.
Sure. So like Stacy mentioned earlier, our event was fairly complex for the first year. We had the Adopt an Object, an art auction, a live event, a Fund a Need, and it was, I think, just a little bit too much for people to comprehend and digest and figure out how to participate in each segment. So we're definitely going to simplify the next time around.
Got it. Children's Museum.
Something else that we should talk about, probably Maggie, Colette talked about their signature event, when they were interfacing with the public was taped, and ours was live. And Maggie organized us for that live event. She was basically our videographer, but we had to do it live. So we practiced it, and she, because we had 6 presenters, 6 people from the museum staff, and board members that spoke, along with a pre-recorded message, like I said, from Peter Coyote. I don't know that needed to be live. I don't agree. I like that it was a live event and felt alive. For us, we didn't have a budget or time to manage a videographer, or God, if that had been added to my plate, I would have just keeled over dead.
So instead, we found a technology solution, an online software called Streamyard, which allowed all of the presenters to be in their own homes and record just using what we had available to us. I mean, the museum does not have a video camera. We didn't have any tech. So I was trying to figure out how we were going to make this happen. And so StreamYard just uses the built-in webcam and the audio, and then it's like a broadcast studio, like Stacy said. So as the producer, I had all of the controls of the magic of TV, and I could put banners up and take them down. So instead of doing editing, we just practiced and rehearsed and executed it live. You could use StreamYard and not stream it and record it and then play it whenever, or post it as though it's live whenever your event is. But for the technology that we had available to us, I think it worked the best to do it live.
And it was incredibly successful and incredibly well done. And I've said it before, and that goes down to Maggie. And it could have been, I mean, truly, that could have been a disaster.
Yeah, it was. We had to practice. It was something that I was like, wow, we should do this for our in-person gala, actually practice the speeches. But another point that Stacy touched on was, so we had our auction open for a whole week, and we did the live event on the Saturday before it closed. So we saw auction activity on the Saturday that it opened, and then it dipped for the whole week. And then we saw a peak again with the live event. So we're sort of talking about, like, how can you use the live event, or could we have used the live event to kick it off or somehow put it in the middle? Because there just wasn't sustained activity. So we didn't get like the competitive bidding or that excitement with the auction.
I got written comments from the Children's Museum that said that they were shortened their auction. So if you want to comment on that, that would be interesting.
I was just going to follow up with Maggie. Yeah. So we looked at some others and thought a longer auction would be better. And ours was 10 days. And we kicked it off. The auction started the same day as our event. And we had a lot of activity on that first day, on Sunday and Monday. And then it really waned. And then we sort of felt like we were constantly sort of sending out messages and newsletters. And I would suggest really short. I don't know if kicking it off the same day or closing like you did is better, but I would say probably 48 hours to 3 days tops. Both, I feel like my overall message in what we could have done better is to simplify a lot of things like that. I can speak to other things on the auction, but other simplifications, we were trying to drive people through our website before they registered, and it made it pretty onerous for people to actually just donate or just sign up. We had 2 different channels that we were streaming it, and while there are benefits, it caused some confusion. So I think simple is best, to try and get people to make it as easy as possible for our donors to give or engage.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I would just follow up with that we use Greater Giving, and they at the time had just sort of pivoted to creating an online bidding platform. So there was a lot of kinks in the way they do things, and they made it really cumbersome. You had to both register. You had to register first before you could bid or donate. And by making people go to our website first and then having to go to Greater Giving, it was really, really, really cumbersome, very confusing. I would say make it as simple as possible for them to give you money, and don't worry about driving traffic to your website or anything else. Just you're there to make money for this event, and just make it easy for them to give you that money.
One thing that I think Colette and Melissa sent was a lower priced auction items being popular, and the ones that you could have an unending supply of seem to work well. Did you want to comment on those?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'll comment first because I'll let Melissa come in behind and talk about it. But I think that was another area where we actually had too many auction items. Just the number of auction items was a little bit overwhelming from what I heard from feedback from people. So be careful about how many auction items. I would say we had like 43. I would say more around the 20 would be what I think feels better. Whatever auction items you do, and we had a number of unlimited supply auction items which were at the lower price option, which is great. And it did bring in a lot of lower priced auction donors, but you do have to think about the back end, which is acknowledging those donors and getting that stuff to those donors. So at $20 and $40 and $60 for these auction items, it's a lot of work on the back end to get these sort of auction items out to people. But having said that, I do think it did really give people an opportunity to give at a lot of different levels, but it was a lot of work.
Maggie and Stacy, did you want to add to that? I see a lot of nodding going on there.
Yeah, definitely. With our art auction, we needed to focus more on the lower priced artwork. We had a range, and the lower priced artwork did the best, had the most competitive bidding. So that definitely needs to change for next year. But I also wanted to, well, no, never mind.
Maggie and Stacy, do you feel like you had the right number of auction items, the actual number?
Too many.
You had too many too, because then you, I thought you had around 20 or 25.
No, we had 36 artworks, I think, and then 25 objects. So total, that was quite a lot. And they were on, because the technology needed to be different, adopting is different than bidding, they were on two separate websites. And so then that just added a layer of confusion. And then also to go back to the point of making it easy for people to give you money with an auction, you have to have a registration process so that you can get their credit card information. So that was another layer. With the adopt an object, they could just fill out the form and make the donation. They didn't have to register, but to participate in the art auction, they had to do this separate registration. So there was confusion there.
I wanted to add,
talked about is separating out those into two totally separate events.
Yeah.
They are different customers. That is a different way of giving. It is a different interest. And I think that going forward, we will do them separately.
That's an interesting take. Melissa, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to add on our auction items, it's interesting. The return on investment for the amount of work was probably not worth it, but it did seem to engage people who wanted to give a little bit. So the smaller end items, the smaller priced items worked well. The other thing is we've all been taught, like, you want these priceless, unique, come to our event, you can only get it here. And in-person events, people sit around the table and say, oh, wow, we could go stay in that person's house or whatever it is. And so we kept trying to do that. And we did get a few really lovely things like that. And they did not go well. We lost the exuberance maybe of in the room competitiveness, maybe because of our era. But I found the things that sold the best were low to mid price range, were things like restaurant gift certificates. They were not the unique setup, you need to call and arrange things. And the amount of time and kind of goodwill from donors to get those auction items sort of backfired, because then they felt that they weren't priced well enough or received well enough. So I think I'd be cautious about what kind of items we get going forward. And again, just on the return on investment, it's a lot of work for a fairly little amount of money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Colette.
Yeah, I would just say second that. You're not going to make the money on the auction. You just aren't. It's going to be your longtime donors that just want to give to your organization. And this is a vehicle to connect with them. And there's going to be some of your lower donors that go on and get the gift certificates. But it's the return on the investment is just not there. I wanted to make another point about MobileCause versus Greater Giving, which I think is true. And that is Greater Giving, at least when we were using it back in September, does not give you the opportunity to stream an event on it. So we had to go through Facebook Live, and we had to go through YouTube. We had to go through these other, streaming platforms. I think MobileCause, if I'm right, you guys were able to stream your event right from your website. At least that's how I remember it. Or there was like a link and you clicked on it and boom, you were right there. You didn't have to go stream anything. Can you talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So that was the beauty of Streamyard, actually. So Streamyard allowed us to stream to multiple channels, which is another reason why I wanted to use Streamyard, because I couldn't figure out how we were going to get this on the internet. And then from Streamyard, we streamed to Facebook and to YouTube, and then MobileCause allows you to embed a live YouTube link. So it shows up you can go to our event website and just watch it there. And you don't even need to know that it's on YouTube. So that worked I was really nervous about some of our less tech savvy donors and talked to some of them afterwards. And they just said, oh, it was so easy. I just went to your event website. It was right there. There's no login, no barrier. It just magically was there. So I'll add Streamyard.
Yeah, I almost feel like that was worth the price of admission for MobileCause, just giving people that direct access to that live event, pre-recorded or live, either one, and not making them go to Facebook or YouTube or anywhere else. Because it was easy. It was completely seamless, which was great.
No, MobileCause though MobileCause was pricey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was, but Greater Giving is too. So it just isn't. And the biggest thing that MobileCause doesn't do is it does not do an auction. So I haven't found the perfect solution there, but.
I want to open the floor to discussion and questions. And we have a nice variety of arts organizations here, from film to live performing arts to art centers. And I wanted to touch, you both organizations have said you would continue to utilize and integrate virtual components in future fundraising events. And I want to ask you about the post-pandemic world. Would you go exclusively back to a traditional gala or fundraising event, or would you include or integrate virtual elements going forward?
Answer, Maggie or Colette, you want to go?
Yeah, I quickly, based on, ROI, we made almost half as much as what we normally would at an in-person event. So, based on that, I would say that we would stick with an in-person event if we could. We've never had to do an auction before. We've always just relied on a fund-a-need, and that's been successful. So yeah, I would say that, based on the amount of money that we were able to raise in person versus auction versus virtual, but it could be that people are getting used to virtual, and that could be changing.
Yeah, and I think that we'll end up doing some sort of a combination. So definitely for the main gala, we will go back to in-person as soon as possible, because the rate of return is much better. And even though we had a live event and we had the ability for people to chat in, there just wasn't that community feeling. You didn't see anybody else that was going. You didn't have conversations during the cocktail hour or at the table. So those things were really missing, but we will probably keep some sort of virtual fundraiser so that we can do two, with the big emphasis on the in-person gala. But I think we can spin the adopt an object in a way where there's more manageable deliverables and still have that be a fundraiser for us.
One question that just occurred to me, did you have anybody report for either organization or anybody else on this call that's done a fundraiser saying that there were people that attended that had not been able to attend before because of geography or accessibility.
That's the exact point for keeping some sort of virtual event going forward, that we can include people that for whatever reason cannot come or do not desire to come to the in-person event, if in-person event is not their kind of thing.
Great. And then I asked you each your most critical piece of advice, and I'm just gonna read them down. And if you have anything else to add, that'd be great. But I'd also like to give us at least 15 minutes here for people to have a discussion and ask you questions. Focus on donors, not the auction. So you've all addressed that about how important that was. Keeping things as simple as possible for the first time. So you've also made that point really well, I think. Better. I think it was the museum of Sonoma County that said we might have been better off only holding an art auction and adopt event later. And you've talked about that as separating out the events, keeping the elements simple, and budget for videography instead of food. So that's a really interesting way. But so with that, I welcome everybody to unmute or ask. Yeah, Maggie.
Just one more thing for us is, since it was a sprint to get it all together, one thing that we didn't do that I highly recommend and we will definitely do is pay for advertising like you do for your normal in-person event. Like somehow that just fell off everybody's plates and it didn't happen. And we relied mostly on just our e-newsletter and social media and a postcard announcement, but we should have still been paying for ads in the Press Democrat and things like that.
That's interesting. Thank you. And then looks like Claire has a question.
Well, no, Sam, I just wanted to go back to your question about different audiences. We have not done a virtual fundraiser with the Film Society, but we did a virtual film festival.
Right.
Very specifically, I thought this was fascinating. Shopkeepers in town said, thank you. We work retail or hotel or restaurant. We're busy on weekends. We can't go to a film festival.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so I think it ties in with what you're all saying. You get a different audience, a different donor group. And by the same token, our usual donors who are closer to my age were like, what? I can't do that. But it brought in people who are in town and who work, I'm in Healdsburg, tourism, retail. But we brought in a new group. And that's what I think you're saying. So I heard it very specifically from retail people. So
yeah, it's interesting. We feel that we have any kind of hesitation we had as a government organization for doing virtual programming. This is broken down those walls and we'll definitely be integrating it for access. So.
I have to jump off, but I very much appreciated these comments. I'm not sure we're going to go there. We're not like everybody else. We're not sure about anything.
Yes, right. But now you know you have local resources to help.
Thank you so much for sharing. I've got pages and pages of notes and
great.
I appreciated the opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Claire. Anyone else? I see Isabel, Enid, Lindsay, Clark, any other questions you have for our presenters about things they did, or did you want to share things that you've thought about trying or have tried or have done already?
Well, I'll go. I just want to say thank you because Colette and Maggie, both, I reached out to you before we decided at the Petaluma Art Center what we were going to do for fundraiser this year. And the Art Center has not had a gala in many years. And so we were just really flying by, like, okay, let's try something. And it's going on right now. It closes tomorrow. And we have done a strictly online art auction. And I would say it has been successful in that we've not done anything like this before. But I appreciate what you had said, Colette, about, I think it was you, focusing on the donors versus the objects, because the outreach that I had done, and I'm, one part-time person, but the outreach that I had done that I was able to do was people were very responsive. in a direct donation capacity. So I just want to say thank you, because I really appreciate the advice that you guys gave us beforehand. And I think not doing the live or pre-recorded event part of it has made a difference. I mean, I think we should have done something, but again, didn't have the bandwidth to do it this time. But next time, I think we would probably do that like you guys have done.
You would do pre-recorded versus completely live? Is that what you're saying?
We didn't do either. We just have done like, it's online, it's open, and you've probably gotten my emails, you know, and the multiple emails, like you said. We did extend hours. So there was a talk of, you know, the duration. We originally had it for 7 days. We decided to extend. It was due to close on Monday, and we extended it to this Friday. And that actually has been positive for us. So I don't know, so much of this is timing too.
That's a really good actual sort of tactic, is you can have one close date and then you can say, oh, by popular demand, we're extending it another 3 or 4 days. That would have been good for us, because we could have, and we were touching people a lot along the way with emails and you know, notices. But yeah, we lost the first 3 days was when we had, sort of like what Maggie said, the first 3 days was the most engagement on the auction, and then it just dropped down to 0 after that. So I would say, but it was really good the first day, and it was great to promote the live event later on that day, on the same day that you're opening up the auction. So I don't know what Melissa thinks, but I kind of think we should keep it like that. You open up your auction and your live event on the same day, and then you do it for maybe 3 days, maybe 4 days after that, unless you have, by popular demand, an extension of the auction.
The only
It's interesting that I'm really interested that you both had the same experience, similar experience of the interest. So it makes me think it's a trend.
Melissa, were you going to say something, Melissa?
I was just say the only problem is I did know somebody who extended their auction, and it irritated donors who expected it to be closed at a certain point. So I would be wary of that. But shorter is definitely better. And I don't know if we would open with it or close with it. What I can say, I thought, I give kudos to the Museum of Sonoma County, because your website was so much nicer than ours for the auction. I kept looking at it going, why did we pick Greater Giving? But what I did like about Greater Giving, aside from the website and the lack of beauty on it and the problems, when it actually got to the mobile aspect of it and the text capabilities and informing people, it was very easy and very effective. And I think that Kelly Olson did a fabulous job with pushing those texts out to continue interest, even though we had this very prolonged auction period.
Yeah, and that's something, again, that just MobileCause does not do. It's not an auction platform. We used HandBid for our auction, and they had the capacity to do the text messages and other push notifications. You could get a notification if someone outbid you and things like that. But that required a separate registration. So it was one of those things where we planned the event without having any technology in place or understanding how any of it was going to work. And so I think if we had the time to figure out the software first, we would have known, okay, the art auction really needs to stand alone because that requires this type of registration process, and then we can have everything else on another platform later.
One thing I did see, I just wanted to jump in with, as far as ending the silent auction, I believe one of our art centers, I think it was Healdsburg Center for the Arts or another organization, did have kind of like a fire sale of things that were not bid on afterwards. And so they said, now, you know, go ahead, it's the reduced price for the starting bids. So things that had been left over, they give people to, it got my attention. I was like, ooh, what's left? You know, you go in and bid. So that's another, I thought that was an interesting way without angering the people that had made their bids and thinking, as Melissa's point, that they were going to find out the final date, the final bid number. Anybody else?
Fortunate, but for one, we actually had bids on everything, and our average bid was 75% of value, which is higher than even an in-person event. Generally, it's about 50% of value. It still doesn't take away from it wasn't a ton of money for a lot of work, but in terms of the donors who gave to the auction, it was a nice message to go back and said, you know, be able to tell them that they brought in a significant amount of value on their item.
Right. Does anybody have any other questions who's not a presenter? I'll give you a chance to chime in. Hi, Isabel.
No, hi, but I just wanted to thank everyone for, you know, the information presented, and Creative Sonoma for just making this accessible to me.
Great.
For me, I'm just thinking about how to incorporate volunteers to help me do some of this for the upcoming year. And because I think that's one of my things, is one of my that I'm trying to develop is how to delegate things.
Yes.
I don't know myself. So yeah, I hope that I can get more young energy
That's
to
great.
help me.
Sounds like, Maggie, you have a knowledge. You could almost start a consulting business with the different softwares.
I've researched a lot, a lot of software. So if you have any questions, just shoot me.
No consulting for Maggie.
To benefit the museum. To benefit the museum.
Only if she takes me with her.
To Isabel's point, with volunteers, we had our amazing committee of our 2 chairs were the same as the last few years. And even with the pivot, they were really, really instrumental in helping. So huge shout out to that team, but also securing chairs and those committee volunteers early on, as I said, like 6, 8, 10 months early, is really, really helpful to have them and their names and their help and their peer-to-peer fundraising.
I would be interested in the capabilities too, because this seems like a different skill set if you're doing the virtual than what a typical gala committee may have been used to be doing, as in my experience with running galas for organizations.
It was
interesting.
We had our gala our gala committee together, and we had put it together with the vision of an in-person event. So for me, I was just like, what are we going to do? Like, I know we have to do this virtual, but I have no idea what we're going to do. And the committee had the vision to create the event. I mean, they came up with the ideas, and I just was like, great, that sounds good. We'll make it work. But without the committee's ideas, I would have just been panicked.
That's great
to say. I don't know if it was quite that. I think the biggest help for us was Berkeley Rep. When I saw Berkeley Reps, how they had put together their virtual event, I thought, wow, it's nice. It's really nice.
Yeah.
Really, it was very clever. I think the way it was structured, and that helped us. That helped us kind of firm up what we wanted.
Yeah, steal. We'll call it inspiration.
Borrow.
Leverage. We leveraged other people's ideas.
Leveraging. That's right. It's the hive mind, which is why we're here today. So, if anybody else have final thoughts before we wrap up, we just have a few more minutes. Anyone else? Kristen, do you want to chime in on anything? Nope, she's good. Anyone else? Well, great. Thank you so much. I feel like this was a really perfect discussion about how it went. There's a ton of ideas, and so we'll try to do a paper recap as well as share the video, because I think there's some people that will really like to hear about how these things worked and the elements worked. Thank you, Stacy and Maggie from the Museum of Sonoma County, and Colette and Melissa from the Children's Museum. And we all hope that you can all be open soon. We'll be rooting for you for sure, as everybody else on this call is looking forward to opening their own organizations. Before we go, we're doing this again next Thursday on virtual arts programs. So people that have been doing classes or arts education or performances virtually, we'll be doing this in the same format. Right now it's Transcendence Theater Company, And we're hoping one of the art centers will be able to join us as well. And then to save the date, the 14th, 21st, and 28th in January, we'll be having a series of equity conversations with 3 different leaders in the community. Alegria de la Cruz from our new Office of Equity in the Sonoma County. Magali Tellis, who used to be with Los Cien, is now with the city of Santa Rosa. She'll be talking about in conversation. And then Jose Soto, who runs the LBC Mariachi, to wrap it up. And this will be with our advisory board member, Cindy Barrios, who's with the YW, right? YWCA. And so we're looking forward to that as kind of a foray into those kind of conversations that we hope to have some training for, especially our smaller and culturally specific organizations going forward that want to work with diverse populations, which is so essential at this time. So we're glad to have you here today, and we look forward to connecting soon. And if I don't see you next Thursday, have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.